Welcome, everyone. I'm Ayse. I'm the head of US sales and VIP account management at Kraken, your one-stop shop address when it comes to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And I'm your host today for our special edition Kraken live stream. We are joined by Tegan Kline from the Graph Protocol. She's the business lead from there. Welcome, Tegan.
Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting.
Sure, it's a pleasure. We're delighted to have you today because we wanted to get to know the graph a little bit better. It has been listed in Kraken very recently, and we follow up very closely with the community and how it evolves. So, how do you define the graph in your own words, and what does it solve? What is the real problem that graph solves?
Yeah, absolutely. So the graph, we are a decentralized indexing and query protocol. And so what does that mean? When I say indexing, you can kind of think of like a database. And then when I say query, you can kind of think of search. And so what we do is we power most of the applications in DeFi in the broader Web3 ecosystem. And so you can kind of think of the graph kind of like an open API that makes it easy for Web2 developers and really any developers in the ecosystem to build on blockchains. And I really love that analogy, like the Control F or the Google, what Google does for the web, we do for blockchains. So before the graph, Ethereum was really difficult to use. And the applications, I think this is where the narrative came in that there were no users in Ethereum just because the applications were really difficult to use because the Ethereum blockchain wasn't created to be easily indexed and queried. And so what you had was applications that would take a really long time to load. And now with the graph, we abstract that indexing layer away. So we make it really easy for developers to build in this space and serve that data to their users. And so really, we've kind of become the backbone of DeFi and the broader Web3 ecosystem. And right now, we're one of the most used protocols in this space. There's a community of over 10,000 active developers that have built over 7,000 subgraphs, and subgraphs are kind of like a proxy for applications. It's not an exact number of applications, but it's close, just because some applications can have more than one subgraph. And so some examples of those are like Aave, Gnosis, Numerai, LivePeer, DAOstack, Decentralized, Gods Unchained, Uniswap. Anytime you go to uniswap.info, how they're pulling that data from the blockchain is via the graph subgraph. And so we've been growing exponentially kind of month over month. And then we just launched our decentralized network. So excited to kind of get into the weeds on all of that.
Yeah, it's great. I was going to ask you about the subgraph also, but you explained in a really, descriptive way. What about the on-chain data and indexing? Like, what information indexed by the graph? And maybe we can talk about like some use cases and what are the successful use cases so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So really anything that's on chain is what the graph helps with. So on chain public data, we're really kind of making open data a public good with the graph. And so some use cases, so DEXs like automated market makers, so Uniswap synthetics, those are some good examples of, anytime an application needs to pull any kind of data from the blockchain, be it trade data or, the time duration of, when if X trade happened over Y duration, how you pull that information is the easiest way is via the graph. And so, yeah, but it doesn't stop there. Like DeFi is one good use case. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of activity. Over 50% of the subgraphs on the graph network are within DeFi, but the NFT space is growing. I think 3 months ago, we had only like 3% of our subgraphs were NFTs, and now it's over 12% of the network or of the hosted service. And so NFTs and gaming platforms are really growing.
So you guys have the mainnet launches very quite recently, but I'm assuming you have been working for some time on the graph. So how you guys, move from the idea generation phase to the production phase?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea for the graph was born about 3 years ago. And about 2 years ago, the hosted service launched. And so the hosted service was our way of kind of showing to developers how they can really get hands-on with the graph. And so it was kind of in a centralized way that we had the hosted service. The graph was running the indexer nodes on the network, and we really focus on the developer level. And so we were going to hackathons. It was very grassroots, like getting with the people building in this space, letting them kind of understand how they could use the graph. And then we also iterated, a million times for developers based on their needs. And that's how we grew from, in June of 2020, we had 1 billion queries, which was a huge metric for us. A couple months before we hardly had any. But then in November, we hit over 10 billion queries. So I think over the course of last month, we saw 100x growth just on the graph. And I think that's a proxy for really the explosive growth on Ethereum and IPFS. That it really kind of blew up. A lot of that was due to kind of the excitement around DeFi. And we're kind of seeing another coming of DeFi now in 2021, but a lot of other innovation in other areas as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's great that you guys are fixes the graph. It fixes many problems for API developers. But however, what are the set of challenges you think which need to be evaluated? On one hand, it's definitely making life easier for the developers. If they would have built by themselves, it would have taken a lot more time. Whereas by just using graph, it's just like a lot more time efficient. But how do you see the set of challenges in the future?
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, the biggest challenge or really risk is just Web3 adoption. I think the graph makes it really easy for Web2 developers to build on blockchains. And we're seeing a lot of movement over from, and when I say Web2, I'm talking kind of about the legacy internet. The internet wasn't really created for companies to monetize data and sell us ads. And I think blockchains are allowing for kind of a new evolution of the internet through kind of this new peer-to-peer ecosystem with tokens, so that you no longer need to monetize people's data. And so I think now that those developers in Web2 have this option to build on decentralized blockchains, more and more will move over. But I think we still are very early days. I think we're still identifying each piece of the stack. And that's one thing that Edge and Node, which is kind of the company that spun out after launching the decentralized network, Edge and Node is really committed to helping identify those pieces of the Web3 stack. And what we want to do is make it as easy to create a decentralized application on blockchains as it is to spin up a website today in Web2. But a long time ago, spinning up a website was really difficult. You had to identify each piece of the stack. And so I'm excited to kind of see it become easier and easier to build in this decentralized ecosystem.
Well, it's great. And I wanted to also talk about a little bit more about the ecosystem. So there are 6 type of roles within graph, like consumer, indexer, curator, delegator, fisherman, arbitrator. Some of them are a little bit more complex, but maybe if we can talk about a little bit like the roles of delegation delegators. What do you earn for delegating graph?
Absolutely. Yeah. So on December 17th, we launched the Decentralized Network. So both indexing and delegation are live today. So indexers are node operators. This is the most technical role in the ecosystem. They are really the backbone of kind of the Web3 space. They're doing all of the indexing for these applications. And we have over 150 indexers live on the mainnet today. And then the delegation is live, and the delegation is the least technical. I'm delegating, anyone can delegate. And all you do is you identify which indexer you want to delegate to, and then you click one button and you delegate there. I would say with delegation, one thing is you want to choose your indexer wisely. Each indexer has their own set of economics. And so certain ones have different payouts. And so right now we're seeing over 20% APY for delegators, which is pretty significant in the network. And then you also have curators. So curation isn't live yet. It'll be launching in the coming months. And the curators, I like to call them the open data alpha finders. So they're the ones, because spinning up a subgraph is permissionless, anyone can do it. You can spin up a Kraken subgraph. I could spin up a Kraken subgraph, but how would the indexers know which one to index upon? Well, you are with the real Kraken team. So the curators would identify that. They would emit signal on a bonding curve stating that your subgraph is the better one. And then the indexers would stake on that. And so that's going to be launching soon. So would love to invite all of your listeners to be delegators today and then potential curators in the coming months. And then on the other side of this, you have the you have the users and also the applications. So applications can pay on behalf of their users, and what they're paying for are really those query fees. And the query fees are kind of similar to how we think about gas costs in Ethereum. And so yes, and so we are the hosted service that we spun up where all those applications live. We're slowly going to migrate those subgraphs over to the decentralized network in these coming months.
Well, I'm glad that we, get to know a little bit more about these like roles today. So, our audience could like be well informed when it comes to, live, for example, the creator role. And let's talk about also the token economics of the graph. So like, token burn, yearly issuance, and initial minting. How would you like, give us some more information on these three topics?
Yeah, absolutely. So, new token issuance basically helps to support behavior that benefits the entire network. So, such as indexers indexing on subgraphs, and that's kind of been identified as the most valuable in the curation market. So, there's inflation within the graph network, and tokens are burned, and then the indexers are really kind of the backbone of the internet. So, they're earning the most in our ecosystem, but the delegators are also kind of helping to secure the network. And so they earn a substantial amount, as well as the curators. So all three of those pieces really earn GRT in the ecosystem.
Oh, okay. And also the graph console, is that what is like the main role of the graph console within the, protocol?
Yeah, so the Graph Council is made up of 10 individuals currently, and each council member represents a different piece of the ecosystem. So it's kind of like this 10-person multi-sig, and each individual represents different pieces within the ecosystem. So one is kind of like the Graph Core team, another is like the indexer community, and then the supporter community. And so we anticipate that that'll kind of grow to as the ecosystem kind of sorts out the best practices for governance. I think that Graph Council will grow to become larger and larger, and maybe even form into a DAO structure in the future.
I hear you. And you also come from a centralized world into a decentralized one. How do you see the, centralized finance versus the decentralized finance? There has been a lot of, controversial topics and comments about it, whether it's the binary or whether they could have synergies in the future. And how do you see the DeFi, world, progress in 2021?
Yeah, I think that, DeFi really spurred a lot of innovation that could not have happened in the centralized world. And I think that with DeFi, we've kind of proven that blockchains are great for price discoverability and also transparency. And I think we're still kind of proving out the decentralization piece. But I think that transparency and decentralization are two key components. And I think as we kind of establish more best practices for the Web3 ecosystem, we'll see more and more products being built on blockchains. And with what we've seen with kind of deplatforming, and also just with GameStop and Robinhood stopping one side of the trade, which is kind of I come from centralized finance. I used to be on the sales and trading floor at Barclays, and usually if there's an issue, you shut down both sides of the trade. But what Robinhood did was shut down just one side of the trade, which is kind of like questionable ethically from my standpoint. And so from where I sit, I feel like the platform should be neutral, and we should build incentives that incentivize every member of the ecosystem. And I think that's really what we've done with the graph, is really try to think thoroughly about these incentive structures, so that we can have neutral platforms that are decentralized, and there's no kind of centralized point of failure, or centralized authority that's going to kind of sway things for one community but not another.
Yeah. And ironically, Robin Hood was one of the first movies that I ever watched. I mean that definitely tells my age, but when in the movie, it was giving, the money from the rich to poor. But unfortunately in year 2021, we see like, other results. But I totally, agree on that one. And what really separates the graph from other, cryptocurrencies? And do you guys have a competitor at the moment?
Yeah, I would say the main competitor to the graph is really these applications building what we've built kind of in-house in a centralized way. An analogy I like to use is, with indexing the web, it's almost like if Twitter wanted to create a social network on top of Web 2, they would have to kind of create the entire database of social data and then build Twitter on top of that, which is duplicating a lot of efforts. And so the main competitor is really developers building this in-house, which takes, between a year to in some cases 3 years. And it's also much more costly. And so I would say that's the main competitor right now. And then you asked, sorry, what was the other question that you asked?
No, I was like trying to like understand like what separates the graph coin. I mean, you guys don't even
Yeah.
have like a real competitor yet, because you guys are helping those developers. But how would you, like, for example, explain to your family and friends the graph? Because Bitcoin, for example, Bitcoin has a store value. Would you be easily say, graph has a store value?
Yeah, I would say, Bitcoin really revolutionized finance. And I think the graph is revolutionizing the internet. And we really help to enable Web3 development. And when I say Web3, I mean like the entire decentralized internet. And so I think like Ethereum helped kind of explode the Bitcoin use case into many different asset classes and usage cases. But the graph, the one difference is that we integrate with every level of the stack. So right now we're integrated with the most applications on Ethereum as well as applications on IPFS, but we are blockchain agnostic and we're here to kind of unite the entire ecosystem. And so we just put out a post of the 8 other blockchains we are looking to potentially expand to, and really looking for feedback from the community on which you think we should kind of integrate with first. But we also integrate with every layer 2. We plan to integrate with every layer 2. And so we're here to really kind of unite the ecosystem, unite the entire Web3 space, and, help move a lot of centralized finance and also centralized internet folks over to the Web3 space.
What is like, upcoming for graph that you haven't said anything at, in previous, webinars or podcasts, but something maybe for just the Kraken audience that you
Yeah.
could tell is a great news?
I would love to kind of do like a deep dive on the network. So right now we have over 1.9 billion GRT staked in the network, which launching in December, that's quite a substantial amount, 19%. And we've seen over 400 million GRT tokens staked by indexers, and over 3,200 unique delegators in the ecosystem. And yeah, I guess we also have a talk coming up for ETH Denver. So Brandon Ramirez is our research lead. He is one of the brilliant minds kind of behind the graph protocol design. And so he's giving a talk on delegation and how to choose your indexer wisely at ETH Denver this Friday. So if the talk comes out in time, would love for your listeners to tune into that one as well.
Sure. And last but not least, where people could find more about the graph?
Yeah, so our Twitter handle is Graph Protocol. You can also join our official Telegram channel. We have one for announcements and one that's kind of an open forum. And then my Twitter handle is The Kline Venture. You can always reach out to me with any graph related questions, but I will share all of our social media links with you so you can include them in the show notes.
Well, great. Thanks, Tegan. And graph is also available trading at Kraken, along with, other more than 30 cryptocurrencies. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And you can check out our other great Kraken video content on our social networks, and see you in the next one.